You know what I find interesting? While something like 115 million people are glued to their TVs this Sunday, losing their minds over the Super Bowl, there's this whole other group of people who honestly don't care at all. And I don't mean the ones who say they don't care just to seem different. I'm talking about people who feel absolutely nothing about it. To them, the Super Bowl hype lands about the same as, I don't know, competitive butter carving. There's no annoyance, no judgment, just total emotional flatness. And that's the part most people don't get. For some people, the Super Bowl simply doesn't register as important in any way. So let's break that down. The first thing to understand is that liking sports isn't some built-in human feature. Nobody is born wired to freak out over a touchdown. That reaction is learned. What's really going on when people get deeply invested in the Super Bowl is a mix of tribal identity, emotional attachment to players they've never met, and something psychologists actually have a name for. It's called basking in reflected glory. Basically, your brain rewards you with dopamine when your team wins, even though you didn't actually do anything except sit on your couch and exist in the right city. For people who don't care about the Super Bowl, watching that reaction in others feels kind of neutral. Like, okay, good for you. That trigger just doesn't fire the same way. There's some interesting research on this too. Studies published in the Journal of Consumer Psychology show that people have very different optimal stimulation levels. Some brains actively seek out loud, intense, emotionally charged experiences. Other brains experience that same intensity as overwhelming or uncomfortable. Neither type is better, they're just tuned differently. So when someone says they don't care about the Super Bowl, they're not necessarily trying to be edgy or difficult. They might just have a nervous system that prefers calmer, lower intensity experiences. A 3-hour game full of constant emotional swings can feel draining instead of exciting. This is where things get a little more psychological. Humans are naturally tribal. We survive by forming groups and competing with other groups. Sports tap directly into that ancient instinct. I know it sounds dramatic, but the emotional response of my team won versus their team won follows a lot of the same patterns as old in-group and out-group dynamics. The thing is, not everyone feels that pull equally strongly. Some people find their sense of belonging in book clubs, small online communities, or niche hobbies like mechanical keyboards. It can be anything that doesn't involve watching grown adults collide over an oddly shaped ball. They're not rejecting connection or community. They've just found it somewhere else, in places that don't require memorizing player stats or arguing about whether something counted as a catch. There's also another concept that helps explain the disconnect, and it's called locus of control. In psychology, people tend to lean either toward an internal or external locus of control. In simple terms, do you focus your energy on things you can influence, or are you comfortable investing emotionally in things you can't control? Think about watching a game. You're yelling at the screen, hoping for a field goal, wearing your lucky socks, but none of that actually affects what happens on the field. Some people are completely fine with that. The emotional ride is the whole point. Other people find that kind of investment frustrating. They'd rather put their emotional energy into things where their actions lead to a direct result. Again, neither way is wrong. They're just different psychological styles. And then there's the obvious factor people rarely talk about: overstimulation. Modern life already feels like nonstop input. Notifications, deadlines, group chats, news cycles, political chaos, money stress, and random links you never asked for. For some people, adding 3 more hours of loud, high-stakes intensity on top of all that just feels like too much. For a lot of people, the Super Bowl just feels like one more thing trying to grab their attention and drain their emotional energy. It's like, can we not do this for once? Especially if you're someone who's wired a bit differently. Psychologists call some people highly sensitive, and apparently that's about 1 in 5 of us. For them, a Super Bowl party isn't fun at all. It's more like a 3-hour sensory overload that leaves them completely exhausted afterward. The bright lights, the loud TV, the non-stop talking. What feels like a celebration to some people can feel like an endurance challenge to others. And there's another piece of this that doesn't get talked about much. People are very different when it comes to dealing with uncertainty. There's research showing that some people are much more comfortable with unpredictability than others. Sports are built on uncertainty. You never know how things will turn out, and that's supposed to be exciting. That unknown is the whole draw. But for people who don't tolerate uncertainty very well, that same unpredictability can feel stressful instead of thrilling. They're not enjoying the suspense, they're just tense the entire time. When you add in the fact that the outcome has no real impact on your actual life, sitting through 3 hours of artificial tension for no real payoff starts to feel pointless. It can feel less like entertainment and more like choosing anxiety on purpose. It's similar to how some people love horror movies and others absolutely hate them. Different nervous systems respond to stress and uncertainty in different ways, even when it's supposed to be fun. Then there's the whole idea of tradition and ritual. The Super Bowl isn't just a football game anymore. It's this massive cultural event. The commercials, the halftime show, the themed food, the entire spectacle. If you don't really care about football, all of that extra hype can make it even worse. It's like being surrounded by people acting extremely excited about something you just don't connect with, and you're expected to play along. You're supposed to comment on the ads and pretend you're invested. And honestly, it can feel fake. You end up watching everyone else get emotionally worked up over something that feels random to you, and that disconnect can leave you feeling strangely isolated. It's not just boring, it can feel lonely in a way that's hard to explain. But let's be honest about something else too. Sometimes there isn't a deep psychological reason behind it. Sometimes people just don't like football, the same way some people don't like cilantro, or techno music, or true crime podcasts. We've gotten so used to analyzing every difference that we forget something simple. People just have different tastes. I know, shocking. Someone who doesn't care about the Super Bowl might be incredibly passionate about Formula One, or Olympic curling, or something completely different. That preference doesn't need a scientific explanation. The expectation that everyone should care about the same thing is honestly stranger than not caring at all. What I find really interesting is how uncomfortable it makes some people when you say you don't care about the Super Bowl. There's often this immediate defensiveness, like you've personally insulted them. And that reaction says a lot about how sports function as identity in our culture. When you reject the Super Bowl, some people hear it as rejecting them, their values, and their entire social world. It's not really about the game. It's about belonging, shared rituals, and maybe even a quiet fear that if enough people stop caring, the whole thing loses its meaning. So if you're someone who doesn't care about the Super Bowl, it's probably a combination of things. Maybe you prefer lower levels of stimulation. Maybe you like putting your energy into things you can actually influence. Maybe competitive sports just don't do anything for you. Maybe the spectacle feels exhausting. Maybe uncertainty feels stressful instead of exciting. Or maybe you genuinely find it boring, and that's the full explanation. All of those are completely valid ways to move through the world. And if you're someone who lives for the Super Bowl, that's just as valid. We don't all experience things the same way, and honestly, that difference is probably the only reason society works at all. One group can be losing their minds over a football game, while another group is perfectly happy doing something else. And somehow, it all still holds together. That's really the whole point. If this resonated with you, make sure to subscribe. And if you want to support these deeper conversations, you can hit the join button and become a channel member. I genuinely appreciate the support.